name is Jan Glor from the Harlem Times, and we are here with Racquel Oden, head of national sales at Chase Consumer Banking. Today we're going to be talking about, her experience in going into Wall Street, her experience at HBCUs, community investment, her home philanthropic efforts. So how are you doing?
So great to be here. As you shared, we're sitting here in beautiful Harlem, and I'm really excited to be here, part of this conversation.
So I like to start. I really love HBCUs, and I've had a lot of conversations with many other prominent. I have, for example, Cheryl McKissick, who's an architect, and we had a glowing conversation about HBCUs. So I wanted to ask you, how was that experience for you? How important and pivotal was that for you for your life?
That's great. So for myself, I actually received my MBA from Hampton University at HBCU. Mm-hmm. And what was pivotal in my life is that's what actually allowed me the entrance to Wall Street. Receiving an MBA from Hampton University and was recruited by a large investment banking firm at the time, Morgan Stanley. That's 25 years ago. And allowed me the access to Wall Street. I then had a very big focus on a commitment to HBCUs because I think this is a great place as African Americans where we really have the opportunity to really thrive in an environment focused on us, about us. And so I've been a board member for Thurgood Marshall for the last 15 years. And we focus on all the public HBCUs, and UNCF focuses on all the private HBCUs. And so there's a little over 101 HBCUs that are still in existence today and just still a pivotal part of the African American community.
So obviously, there has to be a lot of community investment into these public universities. So how is Chase Bank working with these HBCUs to create more inclusive spaces, have better education, better services?
I think for JP Morgan Chase, and I always tell people, I live for the moment where your work and your personal can come together. And at JP, we're very purposeful and very focused on our HBCU schools, and very specifically something called Advancing Black Pathways. Mm-hmm. And in Advancing Black Pathways, we are committed to education and supporting HBCUs. So in our Advancing Black Pathways, we have a commitment to both Thurgood Marshall, which I just told you is the public HBCUs, which there are 49, and UNCF for all the private HBCUs. And as part of that, we actually provide internships to JP Morgan Chase, as well as we talk about career paths of ultimately being hired. And so we know this is where we can find the top talented African American candidates. Very importantly, we are partnering with the schools to make sure that we're part of the curriculum and also having access to these great students who have many options. Because if you think about all the corporations looking for great black talent, this is a great feeder for all of us to commit to and figure out how we actually build the bridges.
And how are you involved with the curriculum?
So I think for myself, sitting on the board of Thurgood Marshall, as well as being very active at Hampton University, not only do we focus on what we call hiring, but we do something called leadership development. And we are brought in as industry experts to speak with the students, and then specifically we do a leadership summit with Thurgood Marshall where we bring in 1,000 of the top African American candidates from the HBCUs, and we have individual sessions with corporations. And so obviously JP Morgan Chase is one of the sessions where we talk about a career on Wall Street, very specifically whether you want to go into wealth management, whether you want to be in consumer business, whether you want to be in investment banking or commercial banking. And then we actually have what we call an ongoing mentorship program with the students that we connect with through this leadership summit.
So I'd like to go back to your journey through Wall Street. So I'd like to kind of hear the beginning. How did you really go up the ranks? How do you go up the echelon?
I don't know. I think the first part is access. And I think what was great about, I said, being at HBCU, you had top Wall Street firms looking for great black talent. And then joining Morgan Stanley, and then as part of that, also needing additional support while part of the community. And so I started, like I said, 20-something years ago at an investment banking firm, and as part of that, through my 20-plus year journey, I not only did investment banking, I did asset management, I did wealth management, and then now doing the consumer part of the business. And I would tell you the biggest piece of that was mentorship within the organizations, but then secondly, it really was picking the right organizations that were supportive of what I call young talent, no matter what that talent looks like. Because I think what you'll see today, entering Wall Street, can be a pretty tough environment, and surviving that is always what people always think through of how do you do that. And I always say it takes mentorship and sponsorship.
So which one was your favorite part? Which field in all the different? industry?
You know what? They're all a close tie.
They're all a close
They're
tie?
all a close tie. Because here's what I would say. I think what I've always believed, and I was taught by one of my mentors who was CEO of one of the companies, in order for you to understand a customer and understand what it really means to deliver somebody is to understand from front to back and understand all parts of the business. And so he always said what made him a great CEO is he understood all parts of the business because that's how customers look at us. And so whether it's asset management, investment banking, it's wealth management, it's consumer, at the end of the day, we have to service our customers. And the more that we understand their needs and understand the business, the better the connection is.
So then going into your role now as head of sales, so could you tell me more about that,
Yes.
about the position?
So here's good news. So sometimes what life does for you is as you matriculate through your different career journeys, it allows me now to be the head of national sales for JP Chase. And what that really means is I'm responsible for all the sales across all the products that I just described for all of our 4,700 plus bank branches, which includes close to about 45,000 employees. And if you think about our branch network, it is to service all the customers. And we have close to 30 million customers that walk into our branches every day or engage with us digitally, or very importantly, our bankers, our advisors work with them. And so my job is to focus on the sales with all of our wonderful, amazing employees across the 47,000 branches, and importantly, make sure that we're delivering based on what the customers are looking for.
So do you think you can go for our audience more in depth at what sales really is?
Yeah. So really, it is really there to serve the customer. So whether you want to buy a home, whether you need a credit card, whether you want to buy a car, whether you want to figure out how do I not only think about my banking relationship, but I also want to think about investing in Wall Street and in the markets, as well as I may own a small business. So any aspect or financial aspect of an individual consumer's life, our job is to fulfill that through not only our products, but the advice of our people.
So going up the chain, you have to have experienced a lot of hardships. So could you tell me about these hardships and how you overcame them?
So I don't think it's a secret if you think about Wall Street, the less likelihood of a black female being part of the fiber of whether it's asset management, wealth management, or investment banking. What I've always said that was important for me is I grew up as an immigrant, first generation in this country, so it wasn't like I saw it in the household and understood what it was to work on Wall Street. I always say what's critical about as an African American female on Wall Street is finding those great mentors and sponsors who can give you the advocacy and also share with you what it is and what it means to be part of this business. I think secondly, I always think about the importance of if you've been given the shot and you're part of the fabric, it's your job to make sure you're bringing as many along with you. And so that same mentorship sponsorship that I received, I know that that's part of my commitment and making sure I do the same. So I told you about my commitment to Thurgood Marshall and making sure HBCUs have access to Wall Street. I think about the work that I do at JP Chase, overseeing, our 4,700 branches, but very importantly, a focus on what we're calling community banking and our ability to be there for Black and Latinx communities, giving them access to what I consider to be my most important focus in my life right now, which is financial literacy. So at the end of the day, we can talk about all the things that we do in the four walls of our bank branches, but if we are not supporting society as a whole, figuring out how do we become more financially healthy, that's the only way you lift an entire community. And then of course, there's great people who can help you with the products and the services and the solutions, but we've got to make sure that we're taking the time to really commit to educating the community about the importance of financial health.
Is it just advancing Black pathways that does the financial health and the financial improvement, or is it, or do you have in a way kind of like a cradle to grave program, kind of cradle to grave idea where you take kids and you give them some intuitive lessons, send them to a bank, get them to an ATM, right? At 8 years old.
Yes.
And then you go all the way up. So can you tell me more about that?
So I absolutely love that question because the answer is cradle to grave. And I think what we do on financial health is if you walked into any of our 4,700 branches, that's what we do every day. The ability for you to walk in, and we always hear how people feel like when you walk into a bank, there's this trust factor. It feels, overwhelming and you're not sure what to do. And the purpose of every one of our employees is to make you feel, one, comfortable, but secondly, support you from a financial education standpoint. And so we have something called Chase First Banking. It starts at 6 years old. You can get your first basic credit card, ATM card, where your parents actually, give you $1 a week for cleaning your room. And it goes onto a little card and it's called a Chase First Banking account and it starts at the age 6. And we start teaching from that age with the parents. We bring them into the branch and we have a conversation about what it is to manage a budget, what it is to actually earn dollars and how you put away some and how you keep some. And then we take it all the way through to someone who's buying their first home, or we take it all the way through to, as I said, my daughter going off to college, and we got her first college account that allowed her to have a debit relationship, as well as a small credit card with limits. And then you migrate to the point where you're sitting down with, a couple with their kids, and you're sitting down with a financial advisor helping them invest. So as you said, from cradle to grave, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to help you retire, and how we're going to make sure that when you are retired, you really have what we call disposable income, that you can enjoy the life that you set for yourself. So our commitment is the full spectrum, whether it's for all of Americans. I'm very clear about that. But specifically, we know there's some communities that need even additional support.
But do you think that, although these are great initiatives, that how do you think you can get people to really buy into that? Yeah. Because that's the difficult part. It's not the education, teaching people. Once they're in, they're in. But how do you actually get them in?
That's true. So I think that is the question of all of us. Which is, if you think about it, financial literacy and everything that I'm talking about is not taught in any of our schools. So by not committing ourselves to this, right, you have a society that's really dependent on what's talked about at the kitchen table. So there's multiple ways that we do this, but one, we try to engage with every generation digitally, because that's one thing where we're always sending little pings of something we have called Credit Journey. Please join us for a credit journey, where it's a little app where you actually click on it and you're able to say, how's my credit? And it actually tells you what you need to do to improve it. We have something called autosave. It's another app that you get on the phone that you say, I'd like to start automatically saving $5 a week or $2 a week. As I spoke about the fact that we invite you in for something we call Chase Chats. Chase Chats are in our 4,700 branches across the country, and we invite you in to have a chat. And we'll tell you, this week it's about budgeting. Next week it's about retirement. This week it's about home buying. And we really allow people the opportunity to get educated. And then thirdly, I just talked about our amazing 45,000 people across all of our branches. Their outreach to the community and their outreach to their customers to invite them in on things that we can tell, hey, we're noticing that you have something coming due. Why don't you come in and let's have a conversation about it? So it's never easy, and we know that's our daily challenge, but it's one that we take on seriously every day to figure out how can we just be there to support the communities that allow us to be there to serve them.
So now we were obviously talking a lot about JP Morgan Chase's work, but now we're sitting in the Apollo Theater. So could you tell me more about your work here in the Apollo?
Sure. So, when I think about historic things such as HBCUs, another one I put in that flagship is, part of the African American community is arts and culture and music. Mm-hmm. And I think for all of you who know Apollo Theater, this is where African American talents had to come originally for them to actually have a stage where they were allowed to perform. Just like HBCUs were created because there was no integrated schools at the time, so for African Americans to get a college education, you had to go to an all-black college. Mm-hmm. And so I put up Apollo in that same bucket. And what's amazing about Apollo is, if we think about the journey that it's been through, it stayed as a flagship right here on 125th Street, right here in the community of Harlem. And now it welcomes and always has all artists, whether you're black, white, but really importantly, allowing there to be a true stage that is committed to the African American community where their music can be heard. And so, if we take a look at, from where we started to the talent that is still on that stage today, you will see what I consider just the future of music, and very importantly, a place where they can continue to have a stage that they can come to. And what's really key about Apollo, it's always affordable. And so if you take a look at what it means to go to a concert today, how expensive it is, we have a commitment that there's always a price range, that is very reasonable, let's say $25, that allows individuals in this community of Harlem to always have access to music and to the stage.
So is the idea behind that to, let's say if it's more affordable, you have young parents with their young kids, so they can send them off and they can all go together and they can see this is a sense of it's getting up inspiration?
It's inspiration, 100% of that, and then also what's important about that is, it's showtime at the Apollo, right? And this is where artists come and they have the opportunity that before they make it big, they actually get to test their skills in front of the community and really test, will my music resonate, and will this audience cheer me on or will they boo me off? And that has been the historic view of how Apollo has always been. And it's based on the fact that if I can do it here, and if this community accepts me, I have a shot of really making it in a big way. And so that is still something that's available today. So not only can you be a young person coming to watch that, you could actually be on that stage as well. And there is absolutely weekly trials, again, post-COVID, when we get back to that world where the stage is open, where you get to actually come in, and if you make the cut, you'll be one of those that will either get to go thumbs up or thumbs down. And you've had a few times where you get to test your chops to figure out, do I have what it takes? And if you don't make it the first time, you come back and you try it again.
So could you also tell me about your other philanthropic efforts, or is it mainly just Thurgood Marshall?
I'm committed in many, many ways on our women's initiatives. So if I think about the work that we're doing, specifically at JP Morgan Chase, we have something called Women on the Move. And if we think about, just the commitment of what we need to make sure there are more women in senior executive roles, as well as women comfortable, joining us on Wall Street, as well as something called, Art for Life. And other big commitment for me for Black artists, having access and the support for their art to be seen, and also their art to be funded so they can actually have the creative ability to allow themselves the affordability to provide us the great work that they can do.
So now that we're in Harlem, what is JP Morgan Chase doing for Harlem?
That's a great question. So if I think about our commitment to the Harlem community, I always tell people, we've always been here. It's not like we're just getting here today. Right here on 125th Street, we just built what we're calling our community branch, which is a large 4,000 square foot branch that not only is holding what we call our innovation lab, we also have what we call a pop-up shop. And it allows the small businesses in the area to actually pop up and show us their small business and welcome the community on 125th Street to come in and see their great offerings so that we can help them as they think about their small businesses. And it's a full-fledged branch that helps everybody, from education to all the products that I shared with you. We have over 11 branches in the Harlem community, and we've been in Harlem a little over 100 years. And so when I think about when people talk about the importance of bringing banking to underserved communities, these are communities that we have always been invested in, and we invite all banks to be invested in. And so when we think about financial literacy and education, it starts with making sure that you're part of those communities and you have a long-standing relationship. And I think what's important about what we've seen in the evolution of Harlem, I think what's also important about it is not only being part of the past and the present, but we've always said we are going to be here forever. And that is our commitment to the Harlem community.
And is that new community branch, you think that's a better way for outreach and that really connects with the community?
What I love about the community branch, and I was part of the team that put this together, and it actually became the model for our community branches across the entire country. There's great things that we learned about it. Before we actually touched one piece of the design in that branch, we met with all the community leaders. We met with all of the customers that entered our branches. And what I will tell you is we learned very quickly the community felt like they weren't part of our branch. And so we actually designed it based on their input. We also designed it based on their importance of what they needed, and they said we need support for small businesses, and that's where the pop-up shop idea came from. And then they said we also need help with business planning, and we need the ongoing education and support. And so then we built a community center, which, by the way, is a large room that can be used by us or the community. And so we host community events there, allowing community leaders and small business owners to actually bring the community in. And we actually partnered with Google because we felt that there was an importance around what we call the digital divide with the community. And so Google is our partner that allows us to do technology, training, and also enabling what we're calling basic coding for the young youth that are part of the community, where they actually come in and actually get training and education with our Google partnership. And so there's a lot of great things that we're doing there, and we're using it to say, how do we serve you better? And Harlem, you tell us, and that's what we're going to build.
And so we've seen really a large amount of growth?
Huge amount of growth. And I always say, when you invest in these communities, they answer by showing up. And I think what we've also been able to prove, not only from the standpoint of what it meant for the business, it's what it's meant for the community. When we started this process, like I said, the community felt they weren't part of our branch. Now the community will tell you, this branch is part of our community. We get to use it for this, that, as well as I reference and send a lot of the community there for education. And I think when we think about how do you start building and changing the paradigm of financial health, it starts with a community leader where their trust does reside and says, hey, I want you to sit down enjoying this here. They're doing this great education session. And so our partnership together is what's made the difference. And I think not only having the technology, the tools, and the people, it's your space, right? And I think hopefully, anytime you visit there, and I, would love everyone to visit us at our community branch on 125th Street, you should feel like it's your branch.
And do you think over time, all of the other branches are slowly going to shift into that, or are they going to all stay in the same lane as that they are?
All of our branches are always shifting, and you're always thinking about what's next. And what I would tell you is we want all of our branches to be community branches, right? If we're in that community, it should represent just that. The model here of the community branch with the pop-up and the community room for people to use the space with us. We've committed to 16 of those across the country. I was just on the road with our CEO last week, and we went to go visit one in Detroit as well as one in Chicago. And the Harlem one was the first one that set the model for the rest of the country.
And so is the energy the same in those other places?
The energy is unbelievable, but I would say the energy is high because really what's great about it is when we were in Detroit last week, this table in the conference room, which is the community center, was nothing but community leaders and small business owners within the community. And what was great about that, I always call it the ability for innovation and product design. They're telling us what they need to serve their needs, which allows us to think through the greatest ideas of what we need to be doing to be more purposeful and being able to service these customers of what's kind of needed in the next evolution.
And so is this the first, community branch, outgoing, this kind of outreach program out of every bank? Is this something that everyone in the industry is starting to get into?
I mean, listen, what I'd speak to is for ourselves, the model here that's different is we're in the communities always, but I think what's different here is where we invited them in to tell us how should we design it and what do you need to build it. And what I would say to you is each bank should be doing that. I'm not going to speak to whether they are or not, because the reason why we get to actually have bank branches is to serve that community. And so we've got to make sure, like anything, if you're a customer-centric organization, your customers vote with their dollars and their time and whether they want to walk through those four walls. And we have 1 million people that visit our branches every day across the country. And so there's a huge opportunity there when you think about what we can be doing differently and making sure we're servicing those needs.
Well, I think we've talked a lot about yourself, your work, and all the different opportunities that JP Morgan Chase is creating for the community. And so I wanted to thank you for coming here and having the conversation with us. And it was a great pleasure to talk with you.
I want to thank you guys for coming to Harlem and joining me here in the Apollo. Thank you.